Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
So for today's episode, I kind of want to do something different. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Englander. I'm CEO and founder of Sales Schema, which is the primary sponsor, only sponsor right now for Digital Agency Growth Podcast. If you don't know us, we help agencies and B2B service companies build a more reliable and repeatable new business system using targeted outreach. We've been at this since 2014, which is crazy. We've now worked with 110 plus agencies. We've generated over 10,000, probably between about 10 and 15,000 relationships with prospects and millions in lifetime revenue. I started this business from a laptop at a rest stop in Ho Chi Minh City when I was being a digital nomad back before that was really that cool to do, I would say. I went on to land consulting clients, found that everyone I worked with tended to be agencies because that was my background. First working on the account side and then leading new business for a creative services house and helping them eventually hit seven figures and win a bunch of Fortune 500 clients and other stuff. So we were doing outbound lead generation for a long time. And the business has essentially evolved since then. And now we're getting into another big transition, which I'm going to tell you about before long. But since the beginning and up through now, our goal has always been to help agencies make new business a lot more reliable and repeatable and predictable. What we found is that everybody's different and everybody has different goals, and there's not one of them that's more or less right than the other. Some people we've worked with over the years, or many, want to scale and are very ambitious and want to grow their organizations as much as they possibly can. Others want to get acquired in however many years, or at least build a business that could be acquired, which is a great way to build a business. And then other people we want to work with really just want to find great clients. They want to be able to choose them instead of the other way around. They might want to have a life and go home on time. And the reason we've continued to focus on this repeatability is it's kind of at the core of everything. You kind of need that to make things happen. Recently, I've been doing a lot more LinkedIn content. So I've been going through the backlog of interviews we've done on the podcast with people that are used to buying and selling agencies, people like David Rodnitsky of 3Q, Kelly Campbell, Kevin Lee of Did It, David Tobin, who's in the brokerage space, who's buying and selling agencies all day. And the one thing that all of them have hammered on is the idea of building a new business system that can run without the ownership, and that even if you want to be involved in the sales system, you at least have the choice of being involved with how you want to. So with that in mind, that's always been the thing that we've been focusing on. And what we've sort of seen is that when it comes to sales and new business, there's like 4 levels of sophistication that agencies go through. Level 1 is what we tend to see as the glorified freelancer. This is a situation where the owner or owners are doing most of everything. So they're handling operations, they're handling sales, they're staying up late, they're doing all this work. They don't have very much clarity on the problems they solve or who they serve. Level 2 is where we see probably more than half of our clients, even agencies that have been at this for more than a decade and have great results for clients and all of that sort of thing. Level 2 is what we call the meanderer. This is the agency that has done really well, but they've never really been able to break outside of referrals and personal networks for new business. And what we've seen is that the agency can do quite well for a while in this state, but eventually they sort of hit this ceiling where they're not able to achieve those big lofty goals like the ones that I talked about. So that's probably accounts for more than half of the clients we work with. Level 3 is what we call the cruiser. And this is an agency that has figured out at least one channel. Often that's an inbound channel to make new business happen. Maybe they're going to trade shows. Maybe they're getting more clarity, so they're more specialized on their market, so they know exactly how to market themselves and where to be. But usually the cruiser still hasn't been able to make outbound work yet, which isn't the end of the world. But the thing that's rough about that is they're still kind of left at the mercy of the click markets and social media platforms and all these sorts of things, as opposed to having more control over the process. And because they're still sort of left at the mercy of inbound, the issue is they're not able to hire a salesperson that can slot into the system because there isn't enough volume coming in yet to A, train that person, and B, make them successful. Level 4 is the unfettered. And this is basically an agency that we've seen that's been able to make outbound and inbound work at a high level. Nothing in life is completely predictable, but their system is a whole heck of a lot more predictable than many others. And they're able to go and achieve, almost anything that they want out there, at least from a sales and a new business perspective. So regardless of, whatever level you're at, and if you're looking to kind of go up a level, whether you want to scale, get acquired, or simply just work with really, really great clients, there's a million million tactics, right? There's a million things that you can do to help your agency, but they all kind of boil down to like three overarching things. The first is status quo, which most people wouldn't present as an option, but it's the option that I want to talk about because that's what, frankly, most organizations choose to do. Most organizations will say, okay, great, I really would love to make inbound work or make outbound work or whatever, but then a big proposal comes up. The next shiny object comes up, there's a fire, something happens, and it just sort of falls by the wayside. And it's usually something positive, I should say. It's usually something that's like, well, new business isn't a priority right now because we just won a client, so I'm going to wait to do this. So a lot of the status quo issue is basically a choice. It is an option, and it doesn't work because it's a mindset problem. You're sort of treating sales and new business as if it's a hobby or something that you do when you need to do it, as opposed to going to the gym and eating healthy. It's something that you do no matter what. So that's option one. Option two is inbound marketing, which is great. This really is not one or the other. It's probably one and the other sort of thing. It's basically, that's what I'm doing right now. Like, right, by creating a podcast, we've also run ad funnels. I think the pros with it is that you come in with a lot of trust. You get to attract people coming towards you. The downside is it's often unpredictable, and it's something where you're kind of left at the mercy of the LinkedIns of the world, the Facebooks, the Googles, and so on. So then there's outbound. And let's talk about what outbound is and what it isn't and the pros and the cons with it, right? I think a big reason that people don't have success with outbound is they're going into it with the wrong mindset, right? So outbound has been positioned alongside lead generation. And often it is lead generation, right? If you get lucky and you happen to be in the right place at the right time with it, it can produce business in the short term. But that's not the way to make it work sustainably over a long time horizon. The way to think about outbound is as a relationship building channel. It is for building relationships with people that you do not know yet. It's not for closing business. So let's talk about the rub with it. The cons is you're going to see your whole sales cycle for the first time. You're going to see how it plays out from somebody that is vaguely interested or vaguely has a problem or is willing to talk to you, all the way through them signing on the dotted line. And you may find that your sales cycle is not 2 weeks. It might actually be months or years. Also, because of this, close rates are going to be lower, right? The average outbound close rates can be anywhere from like 10 to 20%. Those are like macro numbers. So that's the rub with it. Why is it worth it? Why do we think that outbound should be a leg that holds up every table for every agency out there? At least every agency that's serious about building something more repeatable. For one, the con is also kind of a pro. You get in earlier, you get to guide the decision-making process as opposed to being lumped into this commodity bucket. A lot of the times, agencies are like, I want to talk to who's ready to invest $100,000 in a new website or an ad campaign right now. And it's like, yeah, you can go find those people. You can do Google search ads. You can get really fancy with intent marketing. But guess what's going to happen in that conversation? You're going to talk to whoever, CMO, VP of marketing, and they're going to say, thanks, throw your hat in the ring. And then 9 times out of 10, they're going to do business with the organization that they have, guess what, an existing relationship with. So then the question is, wouldn't it be nice to have had that existing relationship? And then how do you build that relationship? Well, a good way is actually reaching out to them in the right way, which I'll talk about, and getting in touch. So you get to get in earlier. Also, outreach more or less scales to the size of your whole market. In theory, everybody is on email, almost everybody's on LinkedIn. You can reach out to them. You can actually engage them. They can see what you're doing. And that is not always the case for the small percentage of people that happen to be searching or happen to be using a particular platform or going to a trade show or whatever it may be. So that's the second reason. The third, and I think one that's very underappreciated these days, is you get to own your process and your audience. This is something that people don't think is important until they're made to understand that it's important. I've been in organizations that got all or most of their business from, for example, search marketing. And then over the course of 6 months or a year, a lot more players entered that click auction, and it became not sustainable from a numbers perspective anymore. And all of a sudden, the organization was left without many options, and it was a real crisis. We've seen this play out over and over again. Facebook changed their policies so that you have to, essentially pay to contact a lot of your audience. LinkedIn has changed policies a lot over the years. Google has made search algorithm changes that have just blown up thousands of businesses overnight. So none of this is to say that inbound marketing isn't worth it or that you shouldn't do ads or anything like that. We do that. It's very effective. There's lots of opportunity there, but you need diversification, and you need to be able to control the way that you essentially interact with your audience. And outbound and essentially email, and to a lesser extent these days phone, is a great way to do that. And actually being able to contact people as opposed to just paying for the pleasure of it. So all these things are reasons why we like outbound and why we think it should be part of the table. So you might be hearing this and you're like, great, we tried to do outbound in-house. It used to work. It stopped working. We hired some lead gen company. They failed miserably. We feel burned. It didn't work for us. So why did that happen? Why did outbound used to work and it stopped, or why did it fail? And in our experience, there's 3 reasons for that. The first is lack of trust. The second is lack of clarity. The third is lack of follow through. Almost every situation we've seen where outbound doesn't work, it's one or more of those reasons. So let's dig into reason 1, which is lack of trust. I've observed this from looking behind the scenes in terms of the responses from C-level people and VPs when we're doing outreach for our clients. A lot of other people I respect have observed this same trend happening over the course of the last few years. And that trend is basically the trust recession. When we are dealing with increasingly noisy spaces online, increased competition from a globalized market, as well as more recently higher interest rates, the merry-go-round of just cheap money reducing. We've seen situations, especially 2023, where a lot of agencies have suffered greatly because of this. But even before that, as soon as 2017 here at Sales Schema, we started to see sort of cracks in the earth revealing this trend. And the fact is, if you have a digital services business, if you have a business, you can start with an internet connection and a laptop, you are dealing with the trust recession. We all are in a lot of different ways. I'll tell you a little story. One of the inspirations for our methodology, which we call relationship sales at scale, I wrote a book by the same name, was inspired when we worked with one client. This was back with doing the old playbook, which was based on sort of more massive cold style outreach, because frankly, that used to work. We worked with one client. They were based in the Bay Area, a successful agency around, I think, between 10 and 20 years, had worked with every blue chip tech company, more or less, was well specialized, had all their ducks in a row. And we went out there and sent a bunch of people case studies. We used a bunch of different channels. We used a complex funnel. And really, it was crickets. Like, nobody was interested in talking right then. And then we sort of said, this is interesting. Could it be because there's lots of agencies pitching these people all day when that probably wasn't a thing, a couple of years before? And that seemed to be the reason. So the thing that inspired what we do now is we basically went out there and did a different sort of campaign. We just sort of said, screw it. Like, we've got 3 minutes left on the shot clock. They're probably going to let us go soon. And we made a smaller list of everyone that had used to work at one of their biggest clients. Let's say it was Oracle and had now gone on to like Dell, let's say. We said, hey, I saw you used to work at Oracle. That's great. We've done a lot of work with them. Hope everything's well at Dell. We should probably connect in the next couple of weeks, something to that effect. Got dozens of meetings. At least one went on to close for a multi-6-figure account. The agency was very successful at the end of the day, and that sort of planted the seed. So the question is, if you're up against this trust recession, how do you identify those prospects that are already likely to trust you? There's more than one way to do it, I should say. People use content. People look at signals that people could be buying. I think there's issues with that because that becomes a very small pool of people, issues that, like I was talking about earlier. Signals, content, nurturing. But what we like to do here at Sales Schema is look at areas where our clients have commonalities with the people that they want to buy. A lot of this is inspired, and I write about this in the book, by the work of English sociologist Robin Dunbar. He talks about these circles of influence, where basically you have the circle of 5. This is your closest support group, typically family or very close friends. You have your circle of 15. These are people that you can confide in for most things and turn to for sympathy. You have about 150 casual friends. These are people you might invite to like a large party or your wedding. You have 500 acquaintances. These are people that are likely to recognize your name and pick up when you call. You have 1,500 familiars. These are people whose faces you can put to a name. And don't worry, I'm not suggesting that you work your family or friends for a new business. But what we've sort of seen and what Robin Dunbar identified is that each one of these circles go out by triples, basically by each level. So our hypothesis and what we've seen work in our campaigns is that there's thousands of lukewarms, maybe 5,000, maybe even more, as you keep expanding, of people that don't know you, but would be likely to have a conversation with you based on something you have in common on a business or personal level. So our whole approach is, why not Venn diagram that group with your market, right? With these people in a C-level or VP position who are very skeptical, why not sell or prospect where you have an unfair advantage and just keep doing that over and over again? I think one issue or one objection people have is like, well, is that just a one and done sort of campaign? And the fact is, as you get more creative with it, and as you potentially bring in the networks of your team or friends of friends and all the different commonalities that you could possibly work with, and then you're talking about re-engaging those people that you already build a relationship with, this is something that you can pretty much do forever. And it's something that almost no one is taking the time to do. So that's how we've sort of found to deal with this problem of the trust recession. Reason number 2 that outbound fails for most agencies that take it on, either by hiring a company or trying to do it themselves, and that is lack of clarity. Most agencies do way too many things for way too many groups of people. This makes it almost impossible to sell or market yourself. It doesn't matter if it's inbound or outbound. If you were going to go set up a LinkedIn or a Facebook funnel, you would have to identify the exact problem you solve, how you solve it for B2B SaaS companies or CPG or whatever it may be. So if you don't have that clarity, it makes it really hard to make anything work at all. So everybody listening to this is different. You might be like, great, we're very well specialized. Yeah, we can always fill it in a little bit more. Or you might be like, yes, Stan, you're speaking my language. It's been hard for us. We're really trying to figure out who we serve. So here's how to deal with lack of clarity. The right way to deal with it is by actually having conversations in your market or within the market that you think you could be a fit for. Or maybe you have a few of them. I'm not saying you have to niche down to just one. In our training, we have a concept called the 70-30 rule, and that's that outbound should be 70% new business, sales, and so on, 30% learning, 30% getting clarity and building understanding. Because in our experience, clarity happens a lot more by actually building lists of your market, seeing the names, people, titles, companies, and then talking with those people than it does by just ruminating endlessly. So that's how you think about building clarity in our experience. The third reason that outbound fails is lack of follow through. What we see a lot of the time is that the agency, and this could be said for almost any sales and marketing experience, starts by getting excited about something, then a new proposal comes in, everybody goes heads down or whatever, somebody goes on vacation, life gets busy, and then it sort of trickles out, falls apart, etc. The way to really set the stage right and make sure it doesn't happen to begin with is not overcomplicating the process. When it comes to outbound specifically, the way that most people get involved in it is they're like, great, I'm going to do outbound. Let me go get into a 12-month contract with an expensive data provider. I'm going to build some lists. I'm going to write some copy, and then we'll see where that goes. Another way people get it wrong is they start out with way too many channels. They're thinking about email, LinkedIn, direct mail, phone, because they've read about some complex machinery, some Rube Goldberg machine that they found online or whatever. Most agencies are not large, sophisticated sales organizations. You might be an owner in sales juggling other things. That's very common. Or maybe if you've gotten to this point, you have one person or so that's solely dedicated on new business. But then you're taking the playbook of some like funded tech company that has like 5 people and all these resources and all these things. So here's the secret. Here's the answer. More channels can bring incremental gains, but at the cost of a lot more complication and a lot more time and energy. So the way to deal with the lack of follow-through problem is kind of multifold. The first is make it manageable. And that really starts with the people. If you've read the book Who or the Who Method, that's the whole thing, is like start with who is doing this, not what you're actually doing, or not how especially, right? So what we found to work from doing this a long time is essentially 3 different hats. Now, these aren't roles necessarily. They could eventually become 3 different people, but it might be 1 or 2 people filling multiple hats or filling multiple sets of responsibilities. Those hats are first and foremost strategy. So this is the person that is thinking about, okay, what verticals are we contacting? What are we saying to them? Essentially copywriting. And what's the timing of this? Like, who are we going to contact when? So typically that's going to be an owner or somebody that has their finger on the pulse of the new business system or the value proposition of the agency. The second hat is research. So this is somebody that can build the lists on a company and a people level. It could be in-house, it could be out of house. It's typically not a VA or a virtual assistant. This is somebody that has more sophistication, that can understand, okay, this is a fintech company versus a bank, or this is a growth stage beverage company versus a dog food brand or something. That's probably not the best example, but you get the idea. So from there, this is somebody that can actually like run the machine and can invest the time in building those lists. That is often starting out as perhaps an owner or perhaps a salesperson so that they can get clarity on the market, but very soon is getting handed off to somebody else. And the third role is the salesperson, right? So this is the face of the campaign, the person from whom the outreach is coming, and the person who is going to be on those initial calls. One issue that we see lots of agencies do, especially if there's multiple partners, is they kind of have sales islands, right? So they're like, okay, when something comes in and it's in CPG, where they're going to go talk to Bob because Bob knows that space. When there's a tech lead, it's going to go to Lisa because Lisa knows tech. And the problem with that is there's nobody that owns the process. And when you're getting beyond a reactive process, that kind of tends to fall apart. So you need somebody that has the time, the motivation, and eventually like the skill set to be running this and to be talking to people. When you get somebody that's interested in speaking, you can always pull in specialists as your sales process is relevant to, and so on. So that's important. So that's the first element of making things manageable, is thinking about who is doing this, not what you're doing. The next thing I want to talk about is how you can make this manageable in terms of a process and a volume perspective. So most people, again, who are doing this are thinking about spray and pray, massive, complicated outreach, a lot of channels, thousands of people contacted per week. Or you might be thinking about doing this as, hey, I'm going to do one-to-one bespoke outreach when I have time. And then you get busy and that all falls apart. So in our training and a lot of what I've written about, we talk about this concept called the Goldilocks zone. And it really leads into the power of just one conversation per day, just one net new conversation, one new relationship essentially per day with your market. And to look at these numbers as opposed to contacting thousands, if you like when we're doing this for clients, we're averaging about 300 people contacted per business week. That's, what is that, 60 per day, basically contacted. From there, and this might not happen overnight, it's not easy, but it's something that we like to work up to. If we're able to get a 1% meeting rate, then that's potentially, a new meeting every day, or essentially a new relationship. From there, if our clients are able to work up to getting a 10% close rate, that's not even our number, that's the macro across outbound, and that could go to 20, but 10% conservatively, then that's potentially 2 more deals a month on just 300 people contacted per week, right? So this is all to say that like none of this is going to be easy, but the numbers are indeed simple, and you don't have to create this massive machine to make it successful. So that's reason number 3. Hopefully that helps kind of get through the lack of follow through issue. With all this in mind, if you're with me so far, and hopefully I've made outbound more approachable and more promising than it was before, there's kind of 3 different options. Option 1, go it alone. Option 2, hire a company to do this for you. Option 3, get the right training and hands-on support. And basically at Sales Schema, since September 2023, we've been really hands-on with this. We've did some previous experiments with it in like 2020. And before that, we've been developing that training program. And we call this 90-day program the Targeted Outreach System. Since around September, we've worked with about a dozen agencies to help them implement the right targeted email outreach system to build relationships consistently with the ideal brands that they're going after. To go over the process for the 90-day program, it's basically 3 key phases. Everybody's different, so some people move through each phase faster and some a little bit slower depending on what they need. But basically, days 1 through 5 is get clarity. Days 6 through 24 is map total addressable market. Days 25 through 90 is launching and then optimizing campaigns. As far as what's inside the program, we're making some optimizations and additions right now. Basically, it's going to consist of weekly group office hours. That's with other agencies, with myself leading them, as well as our team, including our Director of Strategy and Ops, Luis Rodriguez, who has worked on just about every client campaign that we've had over the past year or so to get clients results, as well as our Senior CSM, Michelle Brown. So we're going to be leading these calls every week, dealing with different problems and different challenges through breakout rooms to help make these campaigns work and to help them drive meetings. We're also going to have one-on-one calls at key milestones of the process, so we can do things like give one-on-one copy feedback, look at the way the outreach system is set up to help people move forward. There's a 3-part online curriculum. This has our whole playbook, pretty much all of our IP. It has case studies, it has copy examples, it has our exact step-by-step process for list building, and a whole lot more from there. Also, we are answering questions offline as people are working through stuff through email and chat support. A major part of this is done for you tech stack configuration. So this is the one done for you element. So we're going to be setting up those email domains, warming them up, doing it through our own process that we know to work really well, as well as other tech tools and the whole stack basically. And for all of the above, this is on a team basis for up to 3 people per team. Here are a few wins that we've landed on from working with the first dozen or so agencies since late last year. The first is empowerment. This year, we helped agency teams get a lot more confident about building relationships in skeptical markets where they hadn't been able to do that before, except for just random referrals and personal network intros and that sort of thing. For example, Integral is a New York-based employee experience agency. Ethan McCarty is actually going to be on our podcast soon. He's their CEO. But according to him, and I quote, "After several months in Sales Schema's coaching and advisory program, our team was able to drive a number of high-value opportunities using targeted outreach, but more importantly, their mindset about sales completely changed. Recently, we attended a major conference, and with the learnings from Sales Schema's program, our team, without my prompting, set up a slew of lunch meetings before and during the event. Not only does our team now have skills, but more importantly, they have the confidence to contact our market and build relationships, which is transformational." Another big win I will chalk up to more clarity. So like I talked about, outreach is a lot bigger than just appointments and deals, although that is going to be the main focus. So by building lists of specific companies and people, participants are leaving the program with a really detailed map of pretty much their whole market as it stands right now. This is really an invaluable asset that you can use in all areas of the agency, regardless of what other sales and marketing initiatives you might be doing. For example, a CPG-focused agency in the group going after food and beverage brands were able to map their whole market and find all sorts of ways in that they didn't know were there before. The third win I'll chalk up to manageability. Basically, we've been able to help agencies make outbound something that doesn't just work in theory, but something that works for the time and the energy that they have available. As part of this, even before starting the program, we were able to help a few agencies avoid very expensive long-term contracts for a particular data tool that we know to be overkill in 80 to 90% of cases. This was like thousands of dollars in yearly savings and probably dozens of weekly hours in managing this thing. And the fourth win, I'm just going to chalk up to meetings and new relationships in the market. With this program, we've been able to give agencies the right path from getting away from cold outreach toward a copy and data building system centered more on relationship building and also identifying the prospects who share commonalities so that they can be prospecting only where there's an unfair advantage. The result of this is the most common sort of response we see from prospects who are often in the VP or the C level and so on are, "I very rarely respond to unsolicited outreach, but there is something different about your message." So for example, one agency in the group, after going through our whole framework, they happen to be in the consulting space, was able to really hone in on a slightly reframed ICP in B2B distributors. They built a campaign identifying decision makers in their backyard of Minneapolis, and then they were able to get meetings with those people within 2 weeks of launch. So with that in mind, over the next couple of weeks, we're looking for 5 agencies that want to implement the right targeted email outreach system for sustainably building relationships in their market. For this to be a fit, you should be in level 2 or higher. So basically, you're already getting results for clients. Also, this is the right fit for agencies that are going up market, which can mean a lot of different things, but basically it means you're not selling into SMBs, like you shouldn't be selling to like dentists or restaurants or that sort of thing. In addition, if you are an owner and you're doing multiple things, either you have all the time in the world for this and you're really ready to get to work on it, or if you don't, you have at least some part-time sales and marketing support to help you. That's important. And the most important thing is that you are friendly and coachable. So as for housekeeping, just so you know, we're not going to keep enrollment open forever. So we'll be limiting that at some point. We're also limiting capacity at 5 new organizations over the next few weeks. So if this seems like it could be a fit and you'd like to explore further with our team, you can do that by going to salesschema.com/enrollment. Again, that's salesschema.com/enrollment. Thanks so much for listening and hope we get a chance to talk with you more.